halls of Versailles by the water high have seen it all. Years of laughter, years of tears. They've absorbed the hopes and dreams of thousands of students. Each hallway holds a memory, each classroom a story. And every year, the story begins anew. A fresh batch of faces, another chance at greatness, or at least a chance to survive. Because high school, it's a jungle out there. The first bell rings. Chaos. Controlled chaos, maybe, but chaos nonetheless. Bodies surge through the halls, a tidal wave of backpacks and hormones. The air crackles with nervous energy. Everyone trying to find their place, their people, their tribe. The athletes huddle together, all swagger and braggadocio. The cheerleaders, a flurry of glitter and whispers. And in the corner, the outcasts, the ones who don't quite fit in. But in this sea of faces, one girl stands out, Emily. Her eyes, usually sparkling with mischief, are clouded with worry. A secret weighs heavy on her heart, a secret she can't share. Not yet. Around her, the world spins on, oblivious to her pain. The laughter grates on her nerves, the chatter, a meaningless drone. She feels utterly alone, trapped in a prison of her own making. The weight of the world, it seemed, rested on Emma's slender shoulders. 17 years old, yet the burden in her chest felt ancient. A leaden weight pulling her down, deeper into her own private abyss. She traced patterns on the dusty cafeteria table, her lunch untouched. Each grain of rice on her tray seemed to mock her, a cruel reminder of her churning stomach. How could she possibly eat when her insides felt like a tangled mess of knots? Food seemed trivial. Laughter, a foreign language. Joy, a distant memory. The bell, a jarring clang, ripped through her thoughts, sending a fresh wave of nausea through her. She flinched, her body recoiling from the sound. Around her, the cafeteria emptied in a flurry of movement, but Emma remained rooted to her spot, paralyzed by an invisible force. The fluorescent lights, always too bright, seemed to pulsate in sync with the throbbing in her temples. Each flicker a hammer blow against her skull.
She squeezed her eyes shut, a futile attempt to block out the sensory overload that threatened to drown her.
A hand on her shoulder. She flinched again, her eyes flying open. It was just Emily, her best friend, her brow furrowed with concern. Emily, who always knew how to navigate the choppy waters of Sarah's moods. Emily, who deserved better than to be dragged down by Sarah's darkness.
Sarah? Emily's voice was soft, hesitant. Are you okay? You've been off all day? The question hung in the air, heavy with unspoken worry.
Sarah wanted to answer, to blurt out the truth that clawed at her throat, but the words remained trapped, imprisoned by her fear. Instead, she offered a shaky smile, a pale imitation of her usual cheer.
"I'm fine," she lied, her voice barely a whisper. The lie tasted like ash in her mouth. It was a lie she had told so many times before it felt like a part of her now, a shield she hid behind.
But Emily, her gaze unwavering, saw through the facade. She always did. Her eyes, filled with a wisdom that belied her years, bored into Sarah's soul.
Sarah, she said, her voice firm this time, leaving no room for further pretense. Talk to me.
Across the crowded courtyard, oblivious to Gracie's silent struggle, a different kind of drama unfolded. Max, the epitome of effortless cool, leaned against a brick wall, a smirk playing on his lips. His eyes, sharp and calculating, scanned the group of guys huddled around him. They hung on his every word, their laughter echoing in the afternoon sun.
$10 says I can climb that flagpole, Max announced, his voice a low rumble that dared anyone to challenge him. He pointed towards the towering flagpole that stood sentinel over the school grounds, a symbol of authority and tradition.
A collective gasp rippled through the group.
Dude, you're crazy, one of the guys stammered, his eyes wide with a mixture of awe and fear. Principal Carter will expel you for sure.
But Max just laughed, a sharp bark that held no humor. He thrived on the danger, the adrenaline rush of pushing boundaries.
What's the matter, scared?
Alex taunted, his words dripping with mock sympathy. He knew how to play his audience, how to manipulate their insecurities to get what he wanted. The guys exchanged nervous glances, their bravado crumbling under his scrutiny. They were all desperate for his approval, terrified of becoming the target of his razor-sharp wit.
Fine, but if you chicken out, you owe me 20.
One of them mumbled, digging into his pocket and pulling out a crumpled $10 bill. The challenge hung in the air, heavy with unspoken consequences. Alex grinned, his teeth flashing white against his tanned skin. For a moment, the courtyard seemed to hold its breath. The chatter and laughter faded into the background as all eyes turned towards Alex. He stood there, bathed in the afternoon sun, the embodiment of youthful arrogance and reckless abandon. And then, without a word, he started to climb. He moved with surprising agility, his long limbs propelling him upwards with effortless grace. The guys below watched in stunned silence, their initial bravado replaced by a growing sense of unease. This wasn't a game anymore. This was real.
Oh my God!
Emma, lost in her own world of pain, didn't notice the commotion at first. But the sudden hush that had fallen over the courtyard penetrated her fog of despair. She looked up, her eyes drawn to the figure slowly making its way up the flagpole, and her heart lurched. Alex, his face a mask of determination, had almost reached the top. But as he stretched out his hand to grab the flagpole, his foot slipped. A collective gasp rippled through the courtyard. Emma felt a scream rise in her throat, but no sound came out. This wasn't a game anymore. This was life or death. Mr. Johnson, his back turned to the class, droned on about the French Revolution. His voice, usually animated and engaging, sounded flat, lifeless. Even he seemed to sense that his words were falling on deaf ears. The students, their attention scattered like autumn leaves, barely registered his presence. Outside, the afternoon sun beat down on the manicured lawns of Versailles by the water high. Birds chirped. A lawnmower hummed in the distance. The world outside teemed with life, oblivious to the simmering tension that had gripped the school. Inside, the air hung thick and heavy, suffocating in its stillness.
Emily, please, talk to me, tell me what's wrong.
On the second floor, hidden away in a forgotten corner of the library, Sarah tried to penetrate the wall of silence that Emily had erected around herself. But Emily just shook her head, her eyes fixed on some invisible point beyond the dusty bookshelves. Suddenly, a sharp rap on the door shattered the classroom's fragile peace. All eyes turned towards the door, their boredom momentarily forgotten. In the doorway stood Mrs. Thompson, the school principal, her face pale and drawn. Her eyes, usually twinkling with warmth, were dark and troubled.
Mr. Brown, may I speak with you for a moment? It's urgent.
Mr. Brown, his face etched with concern, nodded curtly and followed Mrs. Thompson out into the hallway, closing the door softly behind him. A wave of whispers rippled through the classroom, speculation filling the void left by their teacher's absence.
What do you think that's about?
Whispered Emily, leaning across the aisle towards her friend Rachel.
I don't know, but it can't be good.
Rachel's words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken dread.
It's Alex. They found a note, a bomb threat, targeting the school. Out in the hallway, the air crackled with tension. Teachers, their faces etched with concern, whispered urgently amongst themselves, their words muffled by the closed classroom doors. Students, sensing the shift in atmosphere, exchanged nervous glances, their usual carefree chatter replaced by hushed whispers and furtive glances towards their phones. Dear God, are the students... Mr. Thompson, his hand flying to his throat, gasped. They're evacuating the building now. We need to keep this quiet. No need to cause a panic. We need to get everyone out safely, Mr. Thompson. Every second counts. Mrs. Carter nodded grimly.
She took a deep breath, composing herself, her expression a mixture of fear and steely determination. Back in the library, Emily's words were drowned out by the sudden, jarring sound of the fire alarm. The high-pitched wail sliced through the air, sending a jolt of adrenaline through Mia's numbed senses. She looked up, her eyes wide with a mixture of confusion and fear. The colour drained from Emily's face.
"What's happening?"
Mia asked, her voice barely a whisper, her own problems suddenly insignificant in the face of this new, unknown danger. Emily grabbed her hand, her grip tight, her eyes scanning the room, searching for an escape route.
"I don't know, but we need to get out of here now."
The library door burst open, and a flood of students surged in, their faces a mixture of fear and excitement. The shouts of fire and bomb threat echoed through the room, amplifying the sense of panic. Mia, caught in the crush of bodies, felt herself being swept away, her hand ripped from Emily's grasp. The tide of terrified teenagers swept Emily along, a leaf caught in a raging torrent.
My feet barely touched the ground as I was propelled down the hallway, my heart pounding in my chest.
She tried to call out to Sarah, but her voice was swallowed by the roar of the crowd.
Fear pulsed through my veins, replacing the numbness that had held me captive.
She stumbled, her foot catching on a discarded backpack. Strong hands reached out, pulling her to her feet before she could be trampled. Outside, the crisp autumn air did little to cool the burning fear that scorched her lungs. The courtyard, usually a haven of laughter and chatter, was now a sea of chaos.
Students milled about in confused clusters, their faces pale, their eyes darting nervously as they scanned the crowd, searching for familiar faces, for reassurance in the midst of the unknown.
Emily, her chest heaving, finally managed to break free from the crush of bodies. She stumbled towards a nearby tree, her legs trembling beneath her. Leaning against the rough bark, she drew in deep, ragged breaths, trying to slow the frantic beating of her heart.
My eyes scanned the crowd, desperate to find Sarah. Where was she? Had she made it out safely? I couldn't lose Sarah. Not today. Not when I finally realized how much I needed my best friend.
A wave of nausea washed over her. The shrill wail of approaching sirens sliced through the cacophony of panicked voices, heightening the sense of urgency. Red and blue lights flashed, casting an eerie glow on the faces of the students, now huddled together like frightened sheep. A loudspeaker crackled to life, a disembodied voice booming across the courtyard, instructions lost in the wind.
Emily, her senses overwhelmed, felt a hand on her shoulder. She flinched, her body coiled tight with fear, ready to bolt.
Emily, it's me, Sarah.
Sarah's face, etched with concern, swam into focus.
Are you all right? I've been looking everywhere for you.
Relief washed over Emily, so potent it almost brought her to her knees. She threw her arms around Sarah, clinging to her as if she were a life raft in a stormy sea. As they stood there, their bodies pressed close together, a strange calm settled over Emily. The fear was still there, but it was muted now, overshadowed by relief. She had found Sarah. She was safe. Looking around, she saw the same sense of unity in the other students. Gone were the cliques and social hierarchies. They were simply students, united by fear. Emily, her hand still clasped in Sarah's, took a step forward, ready to face whatever came next. They were in this together. As Emily and Sarah boarded the evacuation bus, a heavy silence fell between them. The chaos of the last hour, the fear that had gripped them, seemed to have drained them of all words. Emily stared out the window, watching as the familiar streets of their town blurred past. Everything looked different now, tinged with an unsettling sense of fragility.
The weight of the unspoken pressed down on Emily's chest. She knew she couldn't keep her secret bottled up any longer. Not after this. Not when everything felt so precarious, so easily shattered. But the words stuck in her throat, a tangled mess of fear and shame.
Sarah, sensing her friend's struggle, reached out and gently squeezed her hand. The warmth of her touch, the silent understanding in her eyes, gave Emily the courage she needed.
Taking a deep breath, she turned towards Sarah, her heart pounding in her chest. Emily, Sarah began, her voice barely a whisper. There's something I need to tell you, something that happened. Before...
Her voice trailed off, the weight of her secret threatening to crush her. Emily, her gaze unwavering, leaned closer, her eyes filled with a mixture of concern and encouragement. And then, as the bus rumbled away from the school, carrying them towards an uncertain future, Sarah began to speak. The words tumbled out in a torrent, each syllable a step closer to release, to freedom from the prison of her silence. What she revealed, the secret she had guarded so fiercely, would change everything. Their story, a tapestry woven from the threads of friendship, fear, and the courage to face the unknown, was just beginning. Stay tuned to discover the truth that binds them, the secrets that haunt them, and the unwavering bond that will see them through.
Walking through the gates today, New Year starting fresh and white, high school dreams on display, secrets deep we can't hide. Emily's got a tale untold, whispers carried by the breeze. In her eyes the truth unfolds, hidden scars no one sees. Versailles is on the water, we are dreaming. Hearts are beating.